Okay, so we are going to start. So Aslak Hellesøy is going to talk about writing quality code with Cucumber.
Oh, here. Okay. So.
Because it needs to have some, yeah. Could you?
It usually works like this. Is it too high?
It's very brittle because.
Okay. Well.
Okay.
I'll try and put it.
Okay. And a bit lower.
That's better. Thank you. Higher up. Here, where it was. You do it. Okay, hello. Can you hear me? Okay, let me just do a quick. I'm trying this new program here called Stage Manager. Lets me do my control my presentation from my iPhone. Very exciting technology. So exciting that I'm not sure it's going to work. Yeah, there it is. Now we can begin. Okay. Hello, my name is Aslak Hellesøy. I'm chief scientist in a Norwegian consulting company called Beck. And today I'm going to talk about quality code with Cucumber. Now raise your hand if you heard about Cucumber. Wow. Wow. Ooh. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. 6 years ago, I joined a company called ThoughtWorks, and one of the reasons I joined that company was I wanted to learn more about agile development. And one of the things that I wanted to learn was test-driven development. And I didn't know the first thing about test-driven development. I read Kent Beck's book, and I've, tried to figure it out on my own, and I still couldn't quite figure out how to do it. Let me just get a quick raise of hands. Who here is practicing some kind of TDD or BDD? Wow. Okay. So most of you get it, but most of you probably also remember how hard it was to get into the rhythm of test-driven development. And I remember I was living with this bloke called Paul Hammond, and for those of you in the audience who know Paul Hammond, well, I'm not going to tell any stories about him, but I remember we were pair programming on this Java open source framework we made, which is called Pico Container. And that's how I learned test-driven development. And I was sitting next to him and writing code. And every time I was writing code, without writing a test first, he would go like, slap me on the head. And it was like, Aslak, where is your goddamn test? And so that's how I learned test-driven development. Then I started, I started to get a hang of it, and I was trying to teach other people, mostly clients, how to do this test-driven development thing. And that was really hard. Because a lot of people don't get it. And the way test-driven development is taught, and especially the vocabulary we use to talk about it, a lot of people think about testing, and it's much more about design, as you all know. So Dan North, another colleague from ThoughtWorks at the time, he was toying with this idea of behavior-driven development, which Cucumber sort of was born out of. So behavior-driven development is an evolution of test-driven development that brings the customer into the picture, and also a couple of other things that is supposed to make it easier to do test-driven development well. And Dan, he wrote a tool around that called JBehave, in which he was trying to incorporate the ideas of hello? Behavior, it's really funny because you can sort of hear the whole sound, the acoustic inside your head, and when it disappears, it kind of like feels really strange. Yeah, so he made JBehave, and then he wrote RBehave because he thought his idea was so great, he wanted to bring it to the Ruby people because he loves the Ruby people so much. And RBehave never really caught on, but he rewrote it another time and called it Aspect Story Runner. And it was put into this Aspect framework, which I'm also a hello. I'm going to do that hello every time the microphone goes off. So this was kind of like the third rewrite of this tool, like JBehave, RBehave, Aspect Story Runner. People still weren't using it, and it was so great. So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to give it a stab this time. So about 1 year ago, I was sitting on the bus down to my summer house with my fiance, and I was running NewGem. Has anyone used NewGem? So it's this tool you run. Hello. It's kind of like the Rails command that sets up the directory structure for you, but if you just want to develop a gem, you can use NewGem. Hello. No, I'd rather do the hello thing, and thank you. Yeah, so NewGem needs an argument on the command line, and that's the name of the project that you're going to create. And I was like, well, JBehave's been taken, RBehave's been taken, and I don't really like geeky names. So I asked my fiance, she was sitting next to me, and she's a lawyer, so you know, she doesn't have a clue, she doesn't understand anything about what I do. She said, Patty, do you have a good name for a project? Cucumber. All right. So I generated the code and I started working. You know, it wasn't going to be a real name, I was going to get a real name later. But then, you know, and then I started getting some feedback from people, you know, when they start, you know, it's like, Aslak, that's a really kinky name, you know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I wanted to create something kinky, you know, I would call it Cactus or something. But anyway, so I ended up calling it Cucumber. And it turns out it's green, you know, it works well with you know, green tests, that's great. So after a while, Cucumber started maturing, and in the meanwhile, actually, some people were using Aspect Story Runner. And I was talking to David Shalimsky, who's the project lead of Aspect, and I was telling him that I kind of wanted to take Aspect Story Runner out. So it came in like 4 months prior, people started using it, and I was going to, I have this great idea, I can create a Cucumber out again now. So he said, yeah, okay, fine. And I posted on the mailing list. Okay, so Aspect Story Runner is now deprecated, we're going to call it Cucumber. And then I think about 5 minutes later, I got this email on the mailing list. It was like, no, that's a really bad idea. Because, you know, people had already invested time into creating, you know, a lot of tests in, you know, in Aspect Story Runner. So it was kind of popular, but so I decided, well, you know, take it easy. It's going to work essentially the same way as Aspect Story Runner, but it's going to be much, much better. Okay. So fast forward about well, 1 year, or maybe a little bit less than 1 year, half a year. Okay. Well, this thing isn't working with me now. Okay. So then, interesting thing. Now it has 33,000 gem downloads, and that's just in 1 year. For some reason, I don't understand why, but 1,000 people who have GitHub accounts are now following this project on GitHub to see what's going on. You know, so every time I commit some code, there's like 1,000 people watching. You know. And this is one of the greatest things. And if you're not using GitHub for your open source frameworks yet, use it. Because 85 committers, 85 different people around the whole world have contributed code to this project. And I just sit there and, you know, like, take it in, it's like, that's good, that's crap, that's good, that's, you know. And this is a fantastic way to grow a community. There's 47 wiki pages. I think I've written maybe about half of them. And hello. And then the community is kind of like doing the rest of it. There's about 30 related tools. There's a separate page on the wiki page about all sorts of different crazy things that people are hooking this system up to. And there's 6 screencasts, and there's a book coming out. So, you know, I'll just start. Hello. This is a mature project. Thank you. All right, so that's sort of like the marketing pitch and the background. So how many here are using Rails? Okay. Rails is good. I kind of prefer Sinatra. But since I like Rails too. But since I think most of you know Rails, I'm going to show you how to install Cucumber and get started with Cucumber inside a Rails application. Okay? So Cucumber doesn't work only with Rails. But since you all know Rails, I'll show you how to do it with Cucumber. All right? Oh, this one thing. Sometimes I search on Twitter for, like on the Cucumber hashtag and see if somebody said something funny. This was the other day. It's like testing crack. One serious stab at it and I'm hooked. I thought that was kind of funny. All right, anyway. So you open up the command line and you run gem install Cucumber. And also plus these other gems that you don't really need because Cucumber doesn't depend on them, but life becomes much easier if you use those tools too. Now, especially WebRat. You don't actually have to use RSpec Rails and RSpec. You can use test unit as well. I know that, if I were to ask you people, how many people, let's do this. How many people hate RSpec? How many people love RSpec? Right. So, there's like, some people like it, some people don't. You can choose. I'm not going to twist your arm. And then afterwards, you run script generate Cucumber, and that's going to generate a bunch of files into your file system. Just come down like that. And so you get a new folder called features, and inside that folder you get some files. So I'm going to quickly go through and see what's inside these files. So the envrb, so that's the one under support. Envrb, this is really cool. It just has them set up. It loads your Rails environment. It loads some Cucumber Rails-specific files that do stuff like starting transactions, rolling them back after each scenario. Get back to what a scenario is. Does stuff like, for example, if a Rails application, if your model throws an error, that you actually get an exception instead of just having it rendered in a view, stuff like that. So configuration. And then there's WebRat steps. WebRat is an awesome, awesome tool. It's kind of like Water or Selenium for Rails without the browser. Essentially, it lets you, it's built on top of the built-in Rails integration testing framework, but with a very, very short, concise, and domain-specific language-ish kind of thing. It makes it a lot easier to script your Rails app. So WebRat steps is basically all those WebRat things packaged so that you can use them easily with Cucumber. And then there's the paths RB, which is kind of like where you define a mapping from like a human readable name of a page to an actual path. So this is WebRat specific. It's not really Cucumber specific. And well, there was another one, wasn't it? No, there was 3. Okay. So I'm going to show you an example of how we would develop a simple little feature in a Rails application. But before I do that, let me just mention one thing, and that's outside in. Has anyone heard of outside in here? So, from when we're small, we're playing with Lego or any kind of like, little kids, they stack stuff on top of each other like that, right? And that's kind of how we think. If we're going to build something, we're going to have to start with the lowest part, and then we're going to put stuff on top of it. And when we write, web applications or any other kind of application, we start with the database, and then we start with the active record, and then we put the stuff on top of that. So outside in is doing the opposite. And that's part of the whole BDD way of thinking. Well, it could have been called top down, but outside in is kind of like just a cooler name. So, hello. This is how it works. You start with some kind of business value, some kind of benefit, some kind of good thing you want to bring to the business. So that's the outer level. And then you think about, okay, well, what kind of feature do we need to develop to sort of to get this value? Like, for example, more people stay on the page and more people buy stuff, or stuff like that. So then the next level is the feature, and then the next level again is a Cucumber feature, which I'll show you in the next slide. And you run that, and it's a test, so it fails. And then the next thing you write is probably your view or your controller, and you make a little bit of that, and then it goes from failing to passing, and then you write the model, and then finally the table. So you're drilling in. So you're starting with the user interface and fleshing out the business logic as you go. So this is something I recommend you try and do when you do BDD with any kind of tool, actually. And the result is that you get much less code, much better code, much more loosely coupled code, much more awesomeness. So this is the case. So we're going to develop a little application now. Just to set the context, does anyone remember this tweet? I submitted lots of people submitted proposals to the International Rails conference, which was last week in Las Vegas, and they just approved all of the submissions, and a lot of people were very happy for about 10 minutes, and then a lot of people replied to this tweet. So, you don't want this to happen. It's kind of embarrassing. So we're going to look at how would we develop this part of the system using Cucumber. Well, we would start with some kind of user story. Just a little sheet of paper that you take into the meeting and you chat about it. Has 4 elements. It starts with a title, and then a little narrative. In order to reduce time spent on emailing, administrators should be able to mail proposal status to all owners or to all people who have submitted talks. So notice there are 3 elements in here. The first one is some kind of value, some kind of business value you want to get out of this feature. And then there is a role, who is going to use this particular feature, and then the actual feature. Now the most important thing here is actually the value that you're going to get out of it. I read so many specifications in all kinds of forms, everything from really, really thick binders of Word documents to stuff that's short as that. But very often one thing that people omit in their specification is why. So try that when you go back to work on Monday, and talking with a customer or looking at the specification. Try and ask yourself why. Why are we doing this? Because as it turns out, a lot of the time, especially if you ask the question many times, you find out that this is not really valuable. Okay, well, we can skip it. But the good thing is that if the feature survives, then this will follow in code. And you can always go back and kind of like make sense out of why do we have this feature again. And the next thing is acceptance criteria, because, well, this thing, you can give it to a developer or a team of, a pair of developers, and you can ask them, okay, can you write this now? And they can try and understand what you mean, but there's something missing, and this is given when then. And that's a way to describe the behavior of the system, and that's why it's called behavior-driven development. Think of this as a finite state machine. You can think of any kind of system in a particular state, in a given state, in a known state. And then when something happens, then the system should be in another state. And you can describe all of these, and you can have many of them. And if you just can describe those little state transitions in your system, you have essentially described the entire behavior of what you want. Now, you can never describe this completely, because that would take an infinite amount of time, but you can use your head a little bit, find the right balance, and you can get a fairly good description of how your system should behave. So, that's another cool feature. Now, how do I get out of that? Okay. So here is our first feature. I've taken what I had on the index card and I've written it now in a text file. I put it inside my directory, remember that? I got a new folder called features and I put it straight under there. So this one starts with a narrative. So what you see, and this, you know, you can feed this stuff to Cucumber. So Cucumber doesn't really care about what's up here. This is just for you. But from here and down, it'll actually execute this stuff. So this is executable. So if I run this from the command line, just when you install the gem, you get this command line executable script called Cucumber. You can always run cucumber -- help to see all the options. But in the simplest way to use, you just say Cucumber, then the path to this feature file. So when you run it, it'll look like this. Now I know the contrast on this is probably not, is it legible from behind? It is? Okay. Well, that's good. So I didn't need to do this, but I've done it. Just in case. I guess it's more legible. So it doesn't really look like this on the screen. It'll look like this, especially if you have a black screen, which a lot of people have, you have different colors. You can tweak those colors, but there's a lot of colorful output from Cucumber. So just for the sake of the presentation, I've kind of like made like ugly background colors like this. So we run this, and Cucumber prints a lot of these lines yellow. Now this is Cucumber's way of telling us that, okay, well I could read that, I saw that, but I don't know what it means. And if we scroll down a little bit, Cucumber prints this out. You can implement step definitions for undefined steps with these snippets. Let me just go back and say what steps are. Steps are those lines that say given, when, or then. Okay? So this is how you describe that finite state machine, you know, one of those state transitions. And is the same, and is like a synonym for the line above, so you don't have to say given and then given again. So Cucumber will print this stuff out and say, okay, well I understood what you wrote, but you haven't really implemented this yet. And it tells you you can take this code and you can paste it into one of your Ruby files. So we're going to do that. And it looks like this with nice syntax highlighting. There is a TextMate bundle for TextMate, and it's getting support in lots of other editors as well. And so we put this stuff in, and now we can run it again. These are the two new files. We have the feature file that we put in there by ourselves, and we've created a steps file where we put the Ruby implementation of those steps. So we run it again, and now the output is slightly different. Because now we get a to-do or a pending. So that basically means that now Cucumber has actually entered into one of those step definitions and executed it, but we got a pending message. And then all of the other ones are blue. And that means, blue means something went wrong on the previous line. When Cucumber prints something in blue, it means, well, I'm skipping this. I'm not trying to execute it, but I'm still printing it just for you. So you're all familiar with TDD. Now we have to go in here and we have to implement. So replace basically the pending that you saw, the top one, given Aslak Hellesøy proposed Cucumber. We're going to replace that with some code. And here is where it gets really easy, because all we need to do is to take the text that is in the regular expression. What does it say? Aslak Hellesøy proposed Cucumber. And we're just going to try and express that in code. Now we're using Ruby on Rails. So we're just going to do that with Active Record. We're going to create a new proposal with that email and with that title. So we save it and we run it again. And obviously it fails. Why does it fail? Well, we haven't created the class yet. So this is test-driven development that starts on a very high level and you go down. So we haven't created the proposal. So we run some scaffolding and we create the proposal class and the table, and we run the migrations. And we run again. And now this one is green. But now the next one is yellow. So we do the same thing. It says, well, what is it saying here? Pending. OK. The Cucumber proposal is approved. And now we have to start to think, OK, well, how can we do this in code? And this could be probably done in a different way, but that's how I've chosen to do it. But I always have this regular expression that tells me this is just a tiny little part of the whole user story. And you see, I'm always connected to the acceptance criteria that probably was written in collaboration with the customer. So I'm looking up that proposal record, and I'm setting the approved flag on it, and I save it. And now that's green. Now I did cheat a little bit. I did create that accepted flag, accepted column in the first, when I generated the model, so that was not 100% pure TDD. But I'm just trying to show you the flow here. Now the next one is pending. We're going to look inside here. Okay, well now we're going to use WebRat. It's a really ugly logo. I think somebody's making a logo. I couldn't find a picture of a web rat. So I find some scary looking kind of green rat thing. So again, we're going to try and use this same thing. So we're visiting the admin page, and we're clicking that button. And again, here we have to probably have a conversation with the customer. How exactly do you want to approve or send mass? Sorry, exactly do you want to send mass emails? And you can imagine the conversation going, well, maybe I go to the admin page and then I click the send mass email button. Okay, well, we'll do that. So we run it again. It's red. Ooh, I use that picture just to know that I'm halfway through. It doesn't really mean anything. It is nice. It's a nice picture. Nice picture. I wonder where it's from. Green and red and yellow, So we have to create the controller, because that's what the error message said. Well, we don't, we can't go to this page. Okay, we'll create the index. And now we can't find the link. Okay, fine, we'll create the link. And we'll run it again. We create that controller. Oh, that's green. So now we're almost done. There's only the one in the end. We're checking that the email was sent to me. So we have to do some more. We have to open up and see if we have some emails, and we can check if the body in the email is something. And we implement that. By the way, just want to mention this tool here called Email Spec. It's a little plugin that Ben Maybe wrote. Ben Maybe is one of the other team members on the Cucumber team. He's written this. It's a gem. You can use it with RSpec or with Test Unit or with Cucumber. It is kind of like WebRat for Action Mailer. It gives you some really convenient that you can use in your tests, just to look at emails that have been sent, that haven't really been sent, but they've been sent by the Rails framework, and you can look them up again and take a look at what's inside them. So I'm using this little gem. And I have to implement now the logic that will actually send the email. And I'm looking up all the proposals that have been approved, iterating over them, and sending off the email. And a little mailer class. This is just, classic Rails. And a little mailer template. And I run it, and everything is green. And you're sitting out there, and you're like, what? What was going on? I'm just going to hook this thing up because I'm running out of battery. It's like sucking battery out. So I don't expect that you all understood exactly what was going on with all of this. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that. But what I wanted to show you is the flow, how you use this tool, how you start with a test. You make one step, or with a feature, you make one step go from yellow to red and then green. So this is the flow. Sorry about that. So let's step back a little bit and look at what's going on here. So in every feature file, you will see those lines with given, or when, or then, or and. And you will have a matching in your Ruby file. You will have a little something that looks similar, but this is Ruby. And a way to think about this is what's in the plain text file is some kind of method invocation, conceptually. Now, technically, it isn't that, but conceptually, it's like a method invocation. And the step definition, which goes in the Ruby file, is like a method definition. Now, it isn't a method definition, technically speaking, but this method definition from the plain text step. And the way it works is it's a given, which is actually a Ruby method that is defined on the top level object, not on kernel, but on the top level object. So you can just call that method. You pass it two variables. You pass it a regular expression and a block. So when Cucumber parses the text file, for every given when and then line, it'll look for a step definition, because the step definition then gets stored in the dictionary. It will loop through all of them and see, do I find anything that matches this line? And if it does, it'll execute the block. And then it'll step to the next one, and it'll print the output. So sometimes you want to reuse the same step with slightly different arguments. So here I've done a slight refactoring of this particular step. I'm assuming I want to, or maybe I had some other test where I was passing in some other email address and some other, presentation name, proposal name. So I can refactor this. I can introduce a regexp group in my regexp. And the way this works is Cucumber will then try and match, or it'll take, it'll find match groups when it's matching a line to the step definition, and then it will send that as arguments. Oops, too fast. It'll send that as arguments into the block when it's calling it. So this is how you use the equivalent of a method parameter. Okay? And also in the output, the output also reflects that a part of the string has been recognized as a parameter or a regular expression group and printed in a different color. So right here I printed it in blue. The default is that everything will be green, and what's recognized as parameters will be dark green if it's passing. If it's failing, it will be red and dark red. Now you can override those colors by setting the Cucumber colors environment variable. Kind of similar to ls colors if you want to tweak how ls prints files and folders and stuff. Okay. Here's that little thing again. Now, there is a convention that kind of emerged that I wasn't really planning on, but that's people, when you give a tool to people, they will start coming up with conventions. And one convention people started using was to quote these arguments. And Cucumber doesn't really care, but it's kind of practical, because if you open up just a text file in an editor, and if you don't have the step definition or you don't have the output on the screen, you're just looking at the source code, it helps you know that, well, okay, anything with between quotes is probably going to be recognized as a parameter. So that's a convention that you can use. It makes the stuff a little bit easier to read. So you know that you can say I have 55 cucs, and that will work too. And also, when I ran this, and if you had a step that wasn't recognized, Cucumber prints out the step definition little snippets that you can take and paste into your file. If you use the quoted convention, it'll actually take that into account in the regular expression it suggests that you use for it. Okay. Now, some of you might have seen that in the last step I had in this little example for creating this proposal, I had put the string on multi-lines. Are there any Python programmers here? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So do you recognize this syntax? In Python, you can, if you have a string that spans several lines, you can use triple quotes to start and end it. So we're just using this convention here. So that's something you can use if you have a long string that you want to put inside your plain text features. As you see here, it's indented, but when it gets sent in to the step definition, it'll be de-indented, so you won't get the two spaces in front of hi and congratulations, but they will be new line delimited. Now, the number of regular expression groups and the number of arguments to the block normally have to match. It has to be the same number. If you have two regular expression groups, you have to have two arguments. So this is an exception to that rule. If you're using a multi-line argument string like this, you have to add one. So in this case, the first argument will be the email address, and the second one will be the multi-line string. Okay? Now, I like to steal stuff. I really like to steal stuff from other people, especially if it's good. So here we've stolen something from Fit, which is created by the person who's taught you everything you know, but you don't know that he's taught you that. And that is Ward Cunningham. Ward Cunningham is the creator of extreme programming, test-driven development, the wiki, CRC cards, bunch of stuff, and also Fit, which is the first acceptance test framework that gained some traction. And in Fit, or Fitness, which is a wiki on top of Fit, you define your tests in tables. And tables are great for expressing larger data sets that you want to send into your tests. Or you can do the same thing in Cucumber with kind of wiki table syntax. And it works kind of like, it works in a similar way to the multi-line string. But instead of getting a string in, you will get in a table object. So the proposals argument that you see in the block there will be an instance of table. Now, table is a class inside Cucumber. But it has some convenience methods that allow you to iterate over the rows, get the stuff out of the table. So what I'm doing right here is, given the following proposals, an email and title. So I have two proposals in this plain text step here. It'll be sent in, and proposals I call the hashes method on it. Now, hashes returns an array. Each element in that array will be a hash, where the key is the values in the top line, and the values are the values in the current line. So in this case, it'll be two hashes, and with first line in the first hash and second line in the second hash. And you can pass this to Rails create bang method, which a lot of people, I was really surprised when I found this out. Most people use the create bang method and they pass in a hash, but you can actually pass in an array of hashes and create a bunch of records in one fell swoop. So I kind of like this instead of using fixtures, or even, what are they called? Factory girl, factory boy, all of these things. There's nothing called factory boy. Well, but you know, if you want to create another fixture replacement, you can call it factory boy. But I kind of like to have all of this stuff in my feature file, because it allows me to just open up the feature file and I have all the context there in my head. I don't have to open up another file and see what's created, etc., etc. But if you want to use any other kind of fixture stuff, of course you can do that too. Now here's a really, really cool feature. Scenario outline. Imagine I want to have, in this example I had, imagine I want to test several different kind of permutations on the same scenario. For example, I want to test that I get an email if it's approved, or I don't get an email if it's not approved, and stuff like that. So what I can do a little bit of refactoring in my feature file. I can change it from scenario to scenario outline. You see up there, the keyword up there is not scenario, but scenario outline. And what you put underneath is the same. It's given when and then. But now you can use these little angle brackets, and they're kind of like variables. And underneath the scenario outline, you can have examples and then a table. So the table uses the same kind of markup, but this is actually quite different from sending the table into the step definition. This table isn't being sent into the step definition, but it will run the scenario outline, in this case, 3 times. And every time it will replace the angle bracket arguments with the value of the table. So the first time it'll say, and the Cucumber proposal is approved. When I send emails, then Aslak Hellesøy gmail.com should get email. So we'll do that replacement, and then Cucumber will look up a matching step. And this is interesting. As you see, hello? If I have should not get email, that could match another step definition. Okay, so I could have one step definition called should get email and another one called should not get email. And depending on what I put into this what variable, it'll execute one or the other. So, and this is stuff that I didn't think about when I first wrote Cucumber. This is what the community has just come up with. And that's what's so great about having a vibrant community, because they will come up with all these crazy ideas. And sometimes some of them just have to be good. Okay. Does anyone have cats? Yeah? Does it like Cucumber? No? I don't know. Try, this one likes Cucumber. Cucumber. So, and if you want to, if yeah, lol speak, stuffing. So this is probably how if you were to discuss with your cat, how do you want the cucumber? This is probably how it'll explain to you. And here you just translated all the keywords into lol speak. So instead of given, it's I can has, when, then, and. This was actually another, contribution from England. I just picked it off a blog and put it in the code. But Cucumber is actually translated into 32 different languages. I don't remember all of the languages. Now I remember one of the languages that isn't there, and that's Catalan. So before I walk out of this room, I want one of you to help me translate this to Catalan. I know that Cucumber is cogombre. That's all I know. But this is really important because I'm Norwegian, and the customers I deal with, they speak Norwegian, and our domain language, or their domain language, is most of the time Norwegian. If I'm working with a motor vehicle department, it's really, really awkward if every time they have a requirement, I have to translate that into English, and every time I read the English, I kind of have to translate it back to the Norwegian to have the discussion, So I'm a big fan of using your native language, at least for everything that has to do with domain concepts, and then you can drop down to English further down in the code. I think this is one of the reasons why Cucumber is so popular. And it even supports Chinese and all, Arabic that goes the wrong way, other way, and strange stuff. Okay. So I've shown you. Do you know this guy? Yeah. All right. It's Madoff. And one really important thing to do when you write tests is that you have to fail. Okay, it doesn't always go the way you intended, especially not for this bloke. And so you have to fail with style. And I'm going to show you how you can fail something in Cucumber. And this is where you can use other frameworks to do assertions for you. Now, I happen to be a fan of RSpec, so this is how you would do that in RSpec. So right here is not Rails, it's just I have some kind of belly object that maybe I instantiated in a previous step. And I say I should have D or cukes, N cukes in my belly. So the cukes argument is sent in. And I'm comparing that with the actual one. Here I'm just using the assertion framework that's built into Aspec, which basically gives you a should or should not method that you can use. I just want to mention that anything that comes in from a step definition is always going to be a string. Because Cucumber, just because you wrote 55 in the feature file, Cucumber doesn't really know that that's going to be 55 the number, so you have to do the conversion yourself. Okay? Now, of course, it's strings or tables if you use tables. Here's another way to do it a little bit kosher with Aspec. You can do this. And for all of you test unit people, you can of course use assert equals cux2i belly cux length. And you can use should and you can roll your own if you want to. When Cucumber, the only way that a Cucumber step definition or step can fail is by raising an exception. Either you do it explicitly in your step because you're comparing two things that should be equal and they're not, or there could be something done in your code that just blows up and throws an exception. If any of those two happens, your step will be red. Some people, from time to another, I think it happens like every 11 days, somebody asks in the mailing list, I try to return false, and it still passes. Yeah, it'll still pass. Okay, so that's not a good way to fail. Cucumber doesn't look at the return value from the step definitions. Only exceptions. Here's another little feature that I think contributed to why people like Cucumber. When you run it, it'll print it out to the console just like it is in a text file, but it'll add some extra information. It'll add a little hash and then the path to the step definition that matched that particular line. And this is really, really useful if you're trying to navigate. Let's say you want to go in and see, or wanting to change a little bit here. Sorry, does anyone have the time?
5 minutes to 5.
5 minutes to 5, okay. I'm on track. So you can always see what line number a certain step, plain text step, matches in the step definitions. And here is something probably even more important. When something fails, you actually get, do you see the bottom line there? At the bottom of the stack trace, you actually get the line, the file and the line number in the feature file where it failed. And this wasn't in any of the previous versions, and that was actually one of the reasons people didn't like this tool, because when something went wrong, they couldn't figure out where. That kind of sucks. You can't really use a tool like that. So another cool thing you can do is you can take, if you want to run only that one, because a lot of the times you have many features, and 50 of them pass, and then there's like 3 little suckers that fail, and you want to run it again, but you don't want to run all the other ones because it's slow. So you can just pass the, like I've done on the bottom line, you can pass the path colon in a line, and it'll just run that. Okay, so that's really handy. Okay, hooks. Sometimes you want something to happen before you run a scenario. For example, in Rails, you want to start a transaction, and after the scenario is done, you want to roll back that transaction, just like it works with test unit and RSpec. But if you, in another scenario, for example, if you're using Water or something, which Water is this tool that opens a browser and lets you talk to that browser, you may want to create that browser object and close it afterwards. So you have these hooks, kind of like setup or teardown, and before and after you have in Aspec, that you can define that will get called right before or right after. So you pass a block to it, and you can also pass an argument to that block, so you will actually get a handle to some of the internal guts of Cucumber. So here you'll actually get a handle to the scenario object. You can ask it whether it failed or not. And then maybe if it failed, maybe you want to tweet, or do something, maybe not tweeting, but do whatever. I don't know. Another thing you can do is world. Now every step, or actually every scenario, runs in the context of an object. That means that every time you execute a given or a when or a then step definition, self will be the same object. and by default it'll just be object. And if you want it to be something else, you can change it. So you can define a world block, and you can, for example, from world you can say world do, and you can return something else. I don't know, my world, and then in step definitions, every time you run a scenario, this itself will be an instance of whatever you return from the world block. Also, you can extend the world with methods. For example, that's how some of the helper methods, you can add helper methods that you want to use in your step definitions. You just add them to a module, and then you can mix them in like this. And you just put this in a Ruby file under your env or under your support folder, and Cucumber will automatically load it. Another thing, oops. No. Another thing you can do is background. Now this is one of the more recent features. So if some of you use Cucumber, you might not have heard about this thing. There's a lot of features that share the same kind of setup. You know, you stick a bunch of records into the database, for example, and maybe you don't want to repeat that for every single scenario. You can stick it in the background. Now, background is kind of like a before block. It actually serves exactly the same purpose. The only difference is that it's in the feature file and not in the Ruby file. So if it's something that means something to the business or whoever's going to read these features, then I recommend you put it in background. But if it's something technical, like, you know, opening and rolling back a database transaction, which customers probably don't care about, you can stick it in the before block. But you can choose. Here's another cool feature that was added recently. Tagged hooks. Now maybe you have some hooks that you only want to run for some of the scenarios, or some of the features. Now when you define the hook, the before block or the after block, you can pass some tags. Now you can pass as many as you want. Before is takes a vararg. You can pass none or as many as you want. And basically what you're saying is, okay, we'll only run this for the scenarios or features that have these tags. And then onto the plain text features or scenarios, you can put, you know, just regular tags and with an @ sign. And so in this case, this particular block here would run for both of the ones on the side, and so it would run for ipsum and dolor and amet, but not consec. Okay? So tags that are put on the feature level are inherited down to the scenarios underneath, or you can put them straight on the scenario. This is one way to use tags. You can use tagged hooks. Another way you can use tags is tagged execution. So here's just an example feature. I want to take over the world. I really don't want to take over the world, but in case. And I have 3 scenarios. I can take over Europe, I can take over America, I can take over Australia. The 2 other ones. And so I put the languages here. So if I run this like this, Cucumber -t, or the alias for that option is ---- tags, I can pass the name of a tag and then the path to the feature file or the feature directory. It will only run the ones that have that particular tag. Now this is really useful, for example, in continuous integration, where you might have some features that are really slow and the other ones are really fast. And maybe you want to run only the ones that are fast in the first continuous integration run, and maybe that kicks off another one that runs the slow ones. So that way you can get fast feedback and you can get full feedback, but it takes longer. So, you know, so you could tag them with slow. You know, you can tag them with whatever you want. Some people I know, they use tags to put in feature, they have Word documents with funky numbers, and they put those tags into their Cucumber scenarios. So when they want to show the customer that, okay, well, we implemented this use case now in your Word document that has, you know, the number XY59, they can just run all the scenarios with XY59 and those will run. You can also do it the other way. You can put a negative tag on it, or if you put tilde in front of the tag, it'll do the opposite. It'll run the features or the scenarios that don't have this tag. So you can say slow and tilde slow, for example. So that's pretty much it. That's what you have. Those are the features that you have in Cucumber. I showed you everything that is in the Cucumber language, which I've named Gherkin, just so we can talk about the tool and the language as two different things. I'm going to show you a little bit of what's inside Cucumber. So you have the feature files. Now, there was a lightning talk yesterday about Treetop, which is a fantastic little library as a parser generator. You feed it a grammar, and it'll generate a grammar that can parse text. And the way I'm using Treetop will parse this text file and turn it into an abstract syntax tree. So all of the text in the feature file becomes a nice little object graph that is then traversed, and we look at the text, and we look at the step definitions, and we call the right ones. And those step definitions, they talk to your code, and also to some kind of assertion framework to test whether things are equal or not equal, and stuff like that. So this is kind of the big picture of how things are working, in case that wasn't clear. So Cucumber doesn't only work with Rails. It also works with, of course, any kind of Ruby application. The other day, somebody posted a blog that got him to work with Erlang, Ruby, and J interface. A colleague of mine has written a tool called FunFX that lets you use Cucumber to test Flex applications. And of course, you can use JRuby to test pretty much any kind of Java application. Iron Ruby is kind of not there yet, but when Iron Ruby gets mature enough, you can use this framework to test .NET applications. And of course, you can use any kind of web testing framework like Water, Selenium, or Celerity to just basically script how you interact with any kind of web app, PHP. So this is how I'm planning to basically take over the world with Cucumber. Just make it usable and nice for everyone. So on that note, I'd like to open for some questions before we go out and take a break.
Hi.
Hey.
In practice, have you ever heard of anybody also doing, just for the feature files, have you ever heard of people who aren't programmers writing the feature files, like people that are perhaps designers or things like that, like the user interface people? Is that do you think something that's within their grasp or something that you've done?
Yeah, so the question is, have you heard of anyone who's not programmers who write the feature files? Yes, I have.
We have our internal client.
Your client does it? Yeah. One of my favorite stories is a colleague of mine, Øystein. He was writing some feature files, and he wasn't quite sure. He copied it, put it into an email, sent it off to the customer. Does this look right? And next day, he got an email back. He was like, no, not quite. And then she changed the values and added some stuff. And he hadn't really even explained what it was. So the customer just understood. But it depends. Some people are comfortable expressing themselves in this way, others are not. There's definitely some more work to do before it's accessible to most people. For example, some kind of graphical user interface with some help. Code completion for steps, stuff like that.
Would you say that that's the direction that you're planning on taking it in the future?
I'm not planning on taking Cucumber in that direction. Cucumber will remain a plain text tool. But maybe I will write some other tool on top that will do this. I have some stuff on my computer.
Thanks.
That kind of does that.
I have been using Cucumber since November last year. You kind of run into some problems when using it. I mean, like newbie errors or whatever. Like there's step coupling. There's certain issues that you have to take into account. Could you tell a short list of tips for newbies?
Short list of tips for newbies. You mentioned step coupling. Now, if you define an instance variable in your step, like at, something equals, then you can access it from another step. Now, depending on what you're doing, I mean, whatever you do, that couples those two steps. It means that step B that reads this variable won't work unless step definition A that defined it run previously. So there was a discussion about that. I said, well, don't couple the steps, and then I ran into some situations where that was the most convenient thing to do. So just be aware of coupling the step definitions. That's one thing. Another thing is there are two different styles. You can have especially if you're writing a web application, you have something we call an imperative style and declarative style. Now, the imperative style would be when I click on the send mass email button. And the declarative style would be when I send mass email. Do you want to be specific about your user interface elements or not? I don't really have any good tips. It depends on how. Basically depends on how you have to experiment with different styles. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't really think of any, things to look after. I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I've internalized it so much. But if you have questions, there is an IRC channel with 50 people in it all the time, and there is a mailing list, and
I would just say, don't try and translate existing tests or write Cucumber specs on top of existing. Sorry. I would just say, in my personal experience, don't try and write Cucumber specs on features that you've already developed or on tests that you've already got. Do it with new stories, because it's just easier that way, and you get your head around it.
Yeah. Well, just a comment to that. I think that kind of depends. Sometimes we get this big legacy application with no tests, right? And we're like, ooh, don't want to touch it. But that's actually a case where you can use Cucumber and write tests after the fact. Because Cucumber, since it's so high level, you can write tests without running into these classical problems you get with unit testing where you can't really know where to test from. So that's kind of easier, and I've done that a couple of times. I just write some really general tests with Cucumber, maybe using water or something, and then I can start refactoring.
I just mean when you're starting, like the first time you ever use Cucumber, it might be easier to start on a new.
Oh yeah, the first time you use Cucumber, yeah, it's probably easier to get started with something from scratch. I agree. Any other questions? Behind it?
Hello.
Hello.
There's a nice colouring on the output there that we saw. If you're running Cucumber in a continuous integration environment like, say, TeamCity, how do the artifacts look if you're reviewing output?
So the question, how would the output look if you're running in continuous integration? On the command line, there is a switch that is called formatter, --formatter. And the default, if you don't specify, it's called pretty, and it's just to stand it out. You can specify HTML, and you will get an HTML report. So it will look, it will have the same information, but it's in HTML.
Thank you.
Do you know of any issues that can arise from using accented characters?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, if you use accented characters, like in Norwegian, I guess there are
Oh,
yeah, in Hungarian too.
I can show you an example. Accented characters. Is this the one? Just let me kill this thing. Quit. Ooh. Oh, let me sit down.
Hungarian. But yeah.
It works?
Yeah, I meant rather that if you, for example, I guess it's rather a Ruby question, not really a Cucumber-centric question. Like if you use accented characters in regex and all these things.
Yes?
Okay, you can use that. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that matter what version of Ruby you're using?
If you, does it matter what, whether you're using Ruby 1.8 or Ruby 1.9? The way you do it, it kind of does. You have to save the files as UTF-8, and in the step definitions here, in Ruby 1.9, you actually have to put a comment like this. But in Ruby 1.8, you have to define W, no, what is it? $U equals, no, what is it? $K code equals UTF-8, right? So it's just slightly different ways of telling Ruby that, oh, this is Unicode.
Okay, thank you, Aslak. Sorry, we are running a bit late of time. So thank you, Aslak.
Thank you very much.